I'm Kevin Bowe. Welcome to DIY 360. And this is my dear old friend, Bruce McCabe. Bruce has been playing piano and singing and writing for a couple of years now.
Yeah. I joined a band when I was in high school.
Now, you grew up in, I know some of your stories, so let's start with Iowa. You grew up in Iowa, right?
Yeah, Clinton.
So, farm? Were your dad a farmer, or was he a...
No, my dad was a science teacher.
Really?
Uh-huh. But he was a great musician, great guitar player.
Did he play in bands and stuff, or...?
When he was young, he played in Chicago, and we have old... It didn't make it sound like he was that famous, but we started in the last 10 years getting more and more pictures that they went around the whole Chicago area. And I think they were on WLS back when they had...
Big station.
They had country bands and stuff like that.
So he played country?
They did a lot of those country songs.
Huh.
But they did a lot of stuff that was like the Mills Brothers.
Oh, wow.
And Ink Spots.
So he was playing like a hollow body guitar type of thing?
He had a really nice Gibson that I've been searching for, but I think the Japanese got a hold of most of those.
Yeah, right, yeah, it's in some guy's house in Tokyo, yeah.
Well, since it was 1936 Gibson, it's a great guitar that everybody got a hold of, and I've never found one since.
Were your parents were supportive of you getting into music then?
Yeah, they definitely were.
That's nice.
They were both teachers, and my dad hooked me right away because he'd wake me up every morning singing When the Red, Red Robin Comes Bobbing Along.
Wow. My dad used to wake me up by kicking me,
Yeah,
so that's
see?
a little different.
Totally different.
So you started out, because you were inspired by your dad, you started out playing guitar, not piano?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember going to buy a guitar with him. I was going to get a Gibson just like his, but we came across a Martin that we'd never even heard of. So I got a Martin D28 back in 1968, and it was it's still a real classic. It was before they changed the case and everything.
Tell me you still have that guitar.
I still do. I worship it.
I worship you.
I wish I played guitar better. But I worship the guitar.
So that guitar is worth, do you even know what it's worth now?
Well, I kind of asked around, but I'm not going to sell it anyway, so I haven't
What's the point?
researched it too much.
Right. How old were you when you started banging on a piano?
Well, I was taking classical lessons since I was a little kid. And really, to get into music, my first teacher, I was only, a little grade school kid. And I wrote a song, and she had me play it one of the recitals, so that hooks you right away.
So you started writing early.
That was my first song.
You remember how to play you have your first guitar you ever bought, and you remember how to play your first song. That's incredible.
It was a big nerve-wracking moment to get in front of the other students.
Most of the guys I have on the show don't even remember their first wife's name, so that's really impressive. That's good stuff.
Well, I don't remember the first part. No, I do.
Second? So how old were you when you first started playing? Did you switch over from classical to country on the piano, or blues, or rock and roll? What was your first poison?
I was hooked when the Beatles came out, and I wanted to be a guitar player. That's what I really wanted to do, but there weren't that many musicians, Clinton, Iowa was about 30,000, but when the Beatles came out, then all of a sudden everybody wanted to be in a band, but so there was like 5 bands. But I had the best guitar player, who I recorded with just a couple of years ago.
Oh, I remember you telling me
He's
this.
still great.
I remember that someone told me the best day in the history of man to own a music store was the day after the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan, because every kid in America went to buy guitar, bass, or drums.
Yeah,
Huh. So you were the piano guy.
I was, because I kept trying to play guitar and they kept pointing at the piano because I couldn't keep up with him, and I still don't know too many people who can. He's a great player.
He still lives in Clinton, Iowa?
Yeah.
Wow. So how old were you when you moved to the cities here?
Good question. I have to do the math. So
You were a little kid, though.
I moved here in '74. I was born in 1953, so
A kid. You were a kid.
21 or something.
And was Lamont Cranston, was that the first band you hooked up with when you played here, or was there something else first?
No, it was funny because I was like a hippie hitchhiker the second I got out of high school.
Well, now you're a hippie with a driver's license, so
Right.
that's, yeah.
But back then, second I got out of high school, I hitchhiked out to the West Coast, but I'd already been out to the East Coast with my brother the year before I got out of high school, so I was kind of exploring around.
Hitchhiking was like a valid form of transportation back then. I first hitchhiked in the late 70s, and the first time I ever hitchhiked, I was in high school, a guy picked me up, and he wanted to do stuff that I didn't want to do, so that was the end of it. And I went and got my driver's license after that. But
Well, I quit long before that because I'd run into a bunch of scary stuff.
yeah, no more hitchhiking for me. So when you
I'll tell you, one of the last ones is I'd come all the way from the East Coast, and Clinton's right on the Mississippi. So I had one last bridge to go, and I got in a car with a woman who was crying, who said she was talking about killing herself. And she kept talking about it, and we're heading right for that bridge that goes across the Mississippi. That was one of my last rides, because, yeah, we made it across, and I don't think she ever did that, but she scared the hell out of me.
yeah,
But I'd been on rides with, I could tell more stories, serious.
I don't think you students here, now you guys don't hitchhike anymore, right? Nobody hitchhikes anymore.
That's funny, I can't
Okay,
see
good.
everybody.
That's okay, that's better.
It was dangerous,
Yeah.
but it was a great adventure, and one of my heroes is Willie Dixon, and reading his book, I mean, that's what he did when he was young, and that kind of exploring it was interesting.
Yeah. So when you got up to the cities here, what was the first band you hooked up with? Do you remember?
It's called Aces, Straights, and Shuffles, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, the harmonica player was Kim Wilson.
Who later went on to be the Fabulous Thunderbirds.
Fabulous Thunderbirds, and even Muddy Waters said he was the greatest harp player. So that was a good band to get into as far as blues stuff.
And you were working a lot with that band. You guys played a lot, right?
Yeah.
Caboose.
Well, we played a lot, but we had a guitar player who caused so much trouble, then we couldn't get hired back into the club. So that's when Kim Wilson went down to Texas and got famous with the Thunderbirds.
And so after that band, was that then Lamont Cranston?
Then I joined the Cranstons, yeah.
With another great harmonica player.
Yeah, he is.
So for you kids that are under like 90, Lamont Cranston was the biggest rhythm and blues / blues, roots music band in the Midwest for a really long run. And it's hard to explain the differences between the music business at the club level then and now. But one of the biggest differences, I think, two of the biggest differences were that, number one, the drinking age was 18. So clubs were full every night. You can ask Dick Shopto in that time period. He was playing with Daisy Dillman. They would play, I remember he told me this years ago, they would play the Caboose, and if you played there and you were a bigger band, that meant Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. And even on Thursday night, there was a line at the door, Dick told me, starting at 10 o'clock. Yeah. And they would make, I think he told me $10,000 for 3 nights at the Caboose, and that's in mid-70s money, so that's probably like 30 grand now. Because the second big difference, I think, was besides going out to see music, there was nothing else to do. There's no video games. There's no internet. There's no videos. There's nothing on TV because there's only 4 channels. One of them is educational TV, so there's only 3 channels. And that's what people did, was going out to bars to see live music. There was no competition.
What year was he making that much money? Because he was beating us.
I think that might have been late 70s.
Yeah, because in the early days we weren't getting much at all.
But you did. I mean, Lamont Cranston got to be kings of the scene. I remember seeing you guys at those. They'd have these big festivals, the River Flat Jam or something like that. I remember seeing you guys, and I don't know, one of my favorite bands, Peter Wolf, Boston. What's the name of that band? I can't remember. Anyway,
I know who
you know who I'm talking about,
Yeah.
don't you? It'll come to me.
Yeah, it'll come to me too. But
They're named after the guitar player, even though the singer was the show. Jay Giles Band. Jay Giles Band. I thought I saw maybe Lamont with Jay Giles, but you guys opened for the Rolling Stones on some tour dates, and
yeah, well, that was a good moment because it was. I mean, the Rolling Stones are definitely our heroes, and to this day, I still think of them like that. And the Stones, they had some opening act down in St. Louis that was demanding more money, and they fired them, and they called. We had one chance. We were called in the morning. They called Pat Hayes. And they said if we'd fly down to St. Louis, we could open up for them. And the only way we got a hold of everybody is there'd been a big snowstorm, so everybody was stuck at home. Otherwise, it was just a fluke. All of us except one sax player didn't make it, so we went down.
bummer for him.
We opened up for them, and then they had us do 2 more. I think it was Cedar Falls, and then here in Minneapolis.
Opening for the Rolling Stones in your hometown that must have been a fun night.
Nerve-wracking,
Yeah.
but it was great. It
But
was.
now in Lamont Cranston, wasn't Pat singing most of the songs?
Yeah,
Did you sing some though?
yeah, and in those nerve-wracking days,
Yeah.
I just started to sing, so to do it in front of that crowd,
Was it St. Paul Civic Center?
yeah.
I remember this. And weren't you guys, the Lamont Cranston Band was a favorite of Dan Aykroyd from the Blues Brothers? I remember hearing
Yeah.
something at the time, and I don't know if it's true or not, that he got some of his ideas for the Blues Brothers by watching you guys.
Well, Pat Hayes knew, here I go with names,
John Belushi or
Tom Davis, Franken and Davis.
Tom? Oh yeah, Tom Davis. Yeah, a writer on Saturday Night Live in the early
Yeah,
years.
he used to live here in town, and so Pat knew him. I think he even had roomed with him.
So that's the connection.
So yeah, that was a big connection. We were supposed to go on Saturday Night Live, and that was a big time. And we were out there playing in a club where Bob Dylan used to play.
In New York?
And they were just starting the Blues Brothers thing, so they came over and were jamming with us. So that was fun, and then we thought we were going to get on the show, but right at the last minute, they took meatloaf instead.
When they could have had steak. Yeah,
Well,
that's too bad.
I think, Pat Hayes, I think he would have been famous for
Had he gotten that break?
if we'd gone on the show, if at the last minute they hadn't done that. It was one of those times, everything's at
Yeah.
the last minute.
Yeah. I know it's funny because everyone thinks things moved slower back then, but in my memory, things moved faster back then.
Well, who knows what gangsters ran Meatloaf. Maybe they didn't have a choice.
To give these guys an example of the kind of music that you do you have a song from back then that you still play now that you like to play, or anything that you want to play for us, just so they can get a feel for your piano style?
From the Cranston days?
Or anything from back then.
Well, for the piano style,
Yeah.
no. Let's see if this piano, it doesn't have the weighted keys. to start singing, but that's kind of...
That'll work. Who did you listen to early on to get your boogie woogie style going and that left-hand style that you have? Who were some of your heroes when you first started listening to?
Well, Otis Spann was considered God, kind of. He was the Chicago blues player.
Played with Muddy?
Yeah, so all the... that sort of thing is kind of what he did. And then I think the big eye-opener was Johnny Johnston.
From Chuck Berry's band?
Yeah, he was, you know, everybody loved Chuck Berry records. I mean, they were the biggest thing, but the piano was really out front in the mixes. So I didn't really know who the guy was, but I was always trying to sound like him. And then years later, we played with him at the Buddy Guy Club in Chicago, and I got to meet him.
Supposed to be a great guy, right?
He was.
Yeah.
And we were playing an outdoor thing in a little town outside of Minneapolis. This was when I was playing with Jonny Lang. So how many years ago? I don't know now.
Let's not put a number on it. I don't think the numbers matter.
But I was playing with the Crayons and stuff like that. And I got a tap on my shoulder. His band had just played with local. He'd come here and play with some local guys.
Yeah.
So he tapped me on the shoulder, and I got up, and he sat down and played with them the whole show. And I got to sit and watch him, but he's really God. And when they do that, in that movie they made, the history of Chuck Berry, with
Yeah, right.
Keith Richards, and
Hail,
all those
hail,
guys,
rock and roll, yeah.
that's where all you have to do is listen to the piano player, and you'll get the drift of he was the greatest.
Is that, he influenced your right hand more or the whole thing?
The Chuck Berry songs where there's where I'm kind of, all the old blues records sounded kind of like that, and that's what he was playing, was blues, piano.
Over rock and roll.
You know, the guitar was doing that, and the technical thing they were doing was the one part of the band was like the drummer, and a lot of those guys were swinging, like the old. And then the guitar was going. And for them both doing it together, it creates a magic thing. It kind of goes around like this.
Right. Isn't that what the Rolling Stones kind of based their whole early catalog
They
on? Is
based
that
a lot of that on that.
right?
And they had a great piano player too. That what was his name? Ian Stewart.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Boogie with Stu. So after Lamont, is that when you formed the Hoopsnakes, and you were kind of for the first time you were the front guy and singing the whole time?
It was basically I was getting into songwriting finally, and it was hard to explain to everybody how I wanted it to sound.
Easier to do it yourself?
It was easier, even though I never thought of myself as a good singer. At least I could get the song
Right.
across.
That's funny because that's why I started writing and singing too. Not because I ever thought I just wanted to be a guitar player, but I wasn't
Same
good
here.
enough to kill.
I just want to be a guitar.
Yeah, right, exactly. But there was always a better guitar player in the room than me. And also, I got frustrated working with lead singers. Well, my problem was I had a punk rock band in the early 80s, and one of our more popular songs was called, the lead singer wrote it, called I Don't Want to Join the Army. Something you can probably sympathize with.
Yes.
And then he quit the band to join the Army. And so that was my beginning of my distaste for lead singers. And I thought, I might not be good, but at least I'm not going to fold my band to join the Army. So I started writing and singing only so I could at least kind of like keep a band together, just out of efficiency. The Hoopsnakes were a very efficient unit. They were like a little army. I mean, I don't know that there's a live band, except for maybe the Replacements, that I saw more often than the Hoopsnakes. I've probably seen the Hoopsnakes at least 50 times. Because you guys would play so much. I mean, you played 4 nights a week for, how many years was the Hoopsnakes? At least 10 years.
It was about 10 years, yeah.
And then my wife had opened up the Fine Line, and you guys played there. Used to pack the place all the time. I'll never forget that. you guys always opened with that instrumental song. And Charlie Bingham, I was a big fan of, am a big fan of the electric guitar player in this band, Charlie Bingham. And that first song, he always went like this when he'd start playing. Remember how he kind of used to like, almost like, I couldn't tell whether he was like gonna run track and field or take a dump, but it was like, and then he'd start playing, and he played this Fender Esquire guitar, single pickup, kind of like a small telly with one pickup in it, and he had this sound, this tone that was just like, it was like cracking you with a whip when he'd play his guitar. That's probably him calling right now. Don't worry about it.
Go away. Nobody calls me. That's why
Yeah, right.
I was shocked.
I know one guy, a songwriter guy, Dennis Morgan. Remember him? When he checks his email or gets his mail or checks his phone or whatever, he calls it checking the traps. Checking the traps because he knows there's money on the other line. Anyway, so watching the Hoopsnakes was an education in live music for me. Do you have any Hoopsnakes songs that you still play now that you like to play?
Well, there's ones that I better learn them quick because we're doing a reunion thing.
Where at and when?
At Medina.
Oh yeah, that place holds like 2,000 people or something. That's huge. I spent my whole childhood trying to sneak into that place to drink underage. I never made it once. The security there is like, it's like trying to break into Fort Knox.
Well, it was a funny bar. I played it so many times, different bands where there's 10 people.
And sometimes thousands.
Otherwise, we pack them.
All I know about that stage is don't jump. That's the lowest ceiling of about any stage I've ever played. You ever hit your head on the ceiling at that place? No, because you're sitting down.
Yeah, I never even.
Yeah, you don't if you're playing guitar.
We're talking to the same.
Medina Ballroom?
Yeah.
That's a low ceiling. Look up next time you play there. Be careful. It's like driving under a bridge with a semi-truck.
I never noticed that. No.
So give us a little taste of something the Hoopsnakes might do at that show, if you don't mind.
One by one, fill the sky, just like these tears that fill my eyes. I know by now she ain't coming back. Look out my window, still raining. Look out my window, still raining. They say that time heals everything. I felt the pain that love can bring. Don't get no better with each passing day. Any hope I had is slowly fading away. Look out my window, still raining. Look out my window, still raining. I thought the morning would rescue me, but the rain keeps falling endlessly. Still raining. Sometimes I wonder what'll become of me. There ain't much left of what I used to be. The love shone on me like the morning light. Now here I am, alone again tonight. Look out my window, still raining. Look out my window, still raining. Thank you.
So that's a good lead-in for us to start talking about Jonny Lang, because that's one of the songs off of his second.
They took a couple of Hoopsnakes songs.
Yeah, "Lie to Me" off the first record, and there was another Hoopsnakes song off of that "Lie to Me" record.
They did Darker Side.
Yeah, "Darker Side"
And Rack 'em Up.
"Rack 'Em Up." That's the one I was thinking of. So how did you how did you hook up with Jonny Lang? I mean, I met him when he was 13 up in Fargo because I just happened to have a gig at Playmakers, and he had just started playing guitar and got to be friends. And I invited him down to Minneapolis. I remember, I don't know if I ever told you this story, but the night I met him and his family, he got up to sound check. That was back when I was in the Revelators, and I saw him before I heard him, and he was getting up on stage to play, and I thought, he's a 13-year-old boy remember he had that funny kind of Princess Leia haircut, and I thought it was going to be awful, and then he started playing just in sound check and singing, and I was like, it was one of those moments where I felt like I was on acid or something, like this can't be real, this must be a dream, because it was so amazing, and he'd only been playing guitar for 9 months, but he still had the essence of what he is. What he got to be. So I remember sitting and I already had my first gold record by that point because I had written that song for Kenny Wayne Shepherd, "Thank You, David Z." He had used that song in there. So they thought I was a pretty big deal. And I was talking to him, and I remember him and his dad were like, I was like, "We should come to Minneapolis. I'll help you get a Tuesday night at Bunkers, to get you set up in town." And they were like, "You could get us a Tuesday night at Bunkers? Oh my God." This is a guy who ended up, selling 2 platinum records and blah, blah, blah. But they thought that was a really big deal. But how did you meet Jonny?
Well, we were doing a big, I'm trying to think of the name of that. It was a big annual event. I'm trying to think exactly what the name of that club was. But it was in a big tent. And
O'Gara's?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And
big tent show.
Yeah, so that's when he started getting known on the local news channel.
Yeah, right.
So we were supposedly the big band at the end, and his band went on before us. So I'm listening in the back going, wow, 'cause there's no way we're going to win this. It was like a scary moment, but
he was all of 14 then. He must have been 14.
Yeah, so I listened to him, but I couldn't help it. I really liked what he was doing because he was playing the guitar just the way I liked it, like Albert Collins, doing
Yeah,
all kinds of
big
stuff.
Albert Collins influence on the way he strangled the notes back then.
So I was listening, and then I went, well, whatever, I got to go on. But then I asked him, I got to meet him, I said, well, you want to come up and jam on a few songs? And in a way, that was just show business logic.
Let's see. You're young and really cute, and everyone loves you. Why don't you come sit next to me?
Or why don't you get up on the stage
Yeah.
so we can share the applause. But what he
That's
did,
funny.
he got up, and the kind of blues songs we do, and the kind of the way I wrote stuff, they're not straight 12 bars.
Right.
I usually throw a weird chord in there or something, just to try and make it a little more interesting.
Right.
Kind of a Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
So he got up to jam, and he played so good without ever having even heard the songs. He just having fun. I'm still mystified by how he did that for all the time I worked with him.
It's psychedelic. I'm telling you, the first time I saw him, I was like, I thought maybe was hallucinating or I had gotten food poisoning and I was asleep and dreaming this or something like that, because there's no way. And the sounds out of his guitar and out of his mouth singing were completely incongruous with his like 98-pound frame, you know.
Well,
it was
his talent is that's where things get. You can work on stuff, but some people just are born with it. You know.
It's not like democracy where there's one man, one vote. In art, some people are just better.
Well, there's two stories I want to tell before I forget them.
Okay.
But one is that some things like that, like I was reading Bob Dylan's autobiography.
Chronicles.
Yeah, where he went into, people always going, his songs are so long. We were all baffled how he could remember 20 verses. Or 25 verses, you know, a song that goes on for 20 minutes and he remembers the words to everything he wrote.
Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands.
Yeah, but that he explained it in his book, that it was just kind of a fluke of his mind. He was born that way, where he can read a book and pretty much close it, and he remembers everything. To learn song lyrics, all he had to do was listen to one of those old folk songs that went on for 15 minutes. He said after he heard it twice, he remembered all the words. So we're talking about genius in certain areas that the modern human isn't never going to face.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. But I was going to say, after that, this is the second story. After that gig with him, when I first heard him, I didn't normally call David Z about anything.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen him in a long time, but I just called him up and said, I just heard something pretty amazing. And he went, yeah, Kevin Bowe told me about that guy.
And he hadn't returned my call. He hadn't returned my call because I'm sure he thought it was a bunch of bull.
Well, he probably heard it from two people and that.
His ex-wife called him too, so there was three of us on him. I remember he didn't return my call, and I finally left him a message saying, David, if you don't call me back on this a year from now, I'm going to call you up and I'm going to laugh. And then he started calling people back. When I called James Klein, who then started managing Johnny and now has a really big, nice house on Lake Minnetonka, James's response was, oh, there's one of those kiddie blues guitar players in every region around the country, you know, right now, and none of them are going to amount to anything. That's what they said first.
Really? Because
until he heard him. He hadn't heard him yet.
I was going to say, I never heard of young blues guys myself.
There was some guy named Monster Mike back then that was going to be a big deal and wasn't. But, that's the music business, though, until everyone is, like, really cynical. And then when the thing gets big, then they're like, oh, yeah, I discovered him. That was me. I can't tell you how many people have been in a room and it was like, yeah, I discovered Jonny Lang. I just let it go. Because, who cares? It's like Columbus telling the Native Americans that he discovered America. When I saw Johnny play in Fargo, there was a room full of people in Fargo who already knew.
Like I said, it was already on the news before we played.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, but yeah.
It was supernatural, though.
It was, yeah. People have to practice to play guitar like that. But the whole time I worked with him, I never saw him sitting around with guitar on the bus working on anything. He'd hear a line somebody else played,
and
then he'd play it.
Yeah.
Or the rest of us worked on it.
I remember when he started trying to write, and he kind of wrote that way too in the beginning, and he wrote this song, and I remember watching him play it for David Z, which I love David. I would jump in front of a train for him. He's the reason I don't have a day job, but he's a tough guy. Mm-hmm. If he likes something, he's very enthusiastic, but if he doesn't, he's going to tell you. And it's going to hurt. And so Johnny played him this song that he was trying to write for probably Wander This World, not the second album, not the first album. And David goes, yeah, I like that song. I liked it back when it was called Bell Bottom Blues by Eric Clapton. Johnny was like heartbroken.
That's
It's like,
fine.
David, you got to soften your approach. This kid's 15 here, you know.
Well, he'd always, he'd throw away songs of mine because it was too much like the Temptations or something. But he was right.
Yeah, he's a great. Those two records. I'll tell you, one of my favorite things off of "Lie to Me" is a song that unfortunately neither of us wrote. That version of "Good Morning Little Schoolgirl" with Stupka on drums. That is I mean, that song's been done to death. I mean, Jay Giles has done it. A million people have done it. But that's
Well, when you think of it, a little kid singing that song, it was okay. I
Yeah.
mean, it was a pretty dirty song for
it is
old guys talking about
right.
little schoolgirls. I mean, I don't think anybody do that song.
I know.
No.
I know. It's funny the lyrics to those things because it's like Chuck Berry was in his 30s when he sang, that famous line. She's too cute to be a minute over 17. And it's just like, whoa.
Yeah, there's a lot of old songs.
Yeah.
Sweet 16. I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
you don't
It's like,
do
think
those.
about that. These mean different things after you have kids. Like I have a daughter that if you have a daughter and she turns 16, you're like, hey, I hate that song. That's a bad song. He's a bad man.
Dude, now I got grandkids, so
I got one on the way. My first one on the way. My daughter's pregnant right now. Laura's pregnant.
congratulations. You'll like it.
Yeah.
You will.
It's like all the good baby stuff minus the poop. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I don't have to clean the diapers, really.
So you, speaking of cleaning diapers, how old was Johnny when you started playing with him? See, now that was a good segue right there. You see how I did that? Got us back on topic with a
old is-
scatological reference. Nice.
How old was Johnny?
Yeah,
Lang?
when you started, when you
I think he was
got in his band.
14.
14. I remember they asked me to be in his road band. His dad asked me to be in the road band, and I was already making good money writing songs, and got a good publishing deal and stuff like that. And he was like, "Johnny wants you to be in his band," and I was like, "Oh, cool. What's the dough?" And he goes, "Well," and this is full time commitment touring. They were touring all over the place, and he goes, "Starts at 20,000 a year." And I remember telling him, "Dude, I spend that on shoes." And
Is that
was
what
the
you
end
said?
of that. That's what I said.
It's
Yeah.
a song title.
I know. I spend that on shoes. Okay, we can write that. That is a good song title.
Blues song title.
So I blew that gig, but I don't know that. I don't think. I mean, they got Stretch Detail and Paul Detail out of St. Cloud, who's one of my favorite guitar players in the world, and he was the man for that gig. Actually, that whole band you had with him, with Paul on guitar, you on piano, and Doug on bass, and Billy on drums, was a fantastic band. And Island.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was his best band. I mean, that was really not just like a bunch of guys hired to be in a band. There was really something.
There was a magical
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah, I
It had
remember.
a lot to do with Doug Nelson, the bass player.
Yeah,
I'd played in blues bands for years where you just kept telling the bass player, just do that. Don't do that
yeah.
jazz stuff.
Down, boobity bobbity boobity bobbity do. You're fired.
That's kind of what we did, but it wasn't up to me who played bass. And so when he played that way, I started getting to why they did that, because he was, I mean, one of the best bass players ever in this city that
Yeah.
I ever heard. He was brilliant, and so, and he was. Johnny, even at a young age, wasn't going to really listen to anybody else because he was a teenager,
Yeah,
But he'd listen to him, which really worked. And when Doug died, then that kind of made the band totally different without him, because he was really, in a lot of ways, running that thing.
Oh, really? See, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Johnny would go through phases. He listened to me at first. I had like a 2-year run with that kid where I remember if I walked in the room, he'd bound up to me like a beagle or something like that, like I'd practically lick my face. And then you came along, and then he did listen to you for a little while. I don't think you're kind of humble. I don't have that problem, so I don't think you realized it. But he really listened to you. But I wasn't in the band, so I didn't know that thing about Doug. Doug was kind of the core.
Well, it was so simple. It's a time thing. If Johnny goes, what if we did this? Doug would go, no. End of that. That was just, so then Doug would show him how it should go.
Without getting personal, I would say that I don't think there's anyone in Jonny Lang's circle now or for a long time that could get away with it. If after you get that second double platinum record, then I think the dynamic kind of changes. You know what I mean? There's not going to be anyone around him that says, nope, that's a bad idea and we shouldn't do it. You know, it's like Elvis with the Memphis Mafia. You know what I mean? Nobody said, Elvis, the movies are dumb. Take off the white jumpsuit. Lose weight. Quit taking the pills. You know what I mean? Or you're fired.
Well,
It's just one of those things. I learned that from watching this whole thing, you know, Johnny's career. I'd never been a part of anything like that before.
in my case, I kind of like being a sideman because I don't have to argue anything. I just play what they tell me.
Yeah.
And when I grew up, there was no arguing in my house. You aren't going to argue with my dad. I was like, no, that was asking for it. So, and they were all real nice people, but
It's just, it was the
it was the
father
rule.
knows best.
You just don't argue. But that could be a Norwegian thing. I'm not sure.
I think it kind of is because I'm Serbian, and we do skip the arguing and go right into the pillaging and burning, which is kind of how I grew up. So it's just a different, you know,
Yeah, pillaging
form of
and burning,
communication.
that's
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But the Norwegians, no, it's more like, so your childhood is more like an Ibsen play, I assume. But you've gone on, okay, so you had a kind of a sweet gig with Johnny because you were playing in the road band, and well, let's talk about that a little bit. You guys toured a lot. You did tour legs opening for Aerosmith, opening for the Rolling Stones. I remember being in a room with Johnny where the phone rang, and it was Mick Jagger's daughter calling Johnny because
Yeah.
they were like, I don't know, you know,
They had a little thing.
yeah, a little thing going on. And Johnny told me once he called her, and Mick picked up the phone and said, "Is this Jonny Lang calling my daughter?" Like that.
Well, it was funny because, yeah, when he was kind of hanging out with Mick's daughter, then Mick would come to some of our shows and just hang backstage and talk with us. But he was just a dad watching out for his.
Yeah, right,
daughter.
right.
So that was kind of unique because I grew up thinking of him a certain way, but in the end, he's a dad like everybody
Yeah.
else. And
Puts his pants on one leg at a time.
yeah, we talked to him. Where are you playing next? You know,
Yeah.
can't help but kind of worship.
Yeah, right. It's hard.
But he go, yeah, we're playing a gig in Vegas. It's kind of echoey. He's just talking about it like
Yeah.
some bar we were playing.
Yeah, right,
That's the way
exactly.
he looked at it.
How about the Aerosmith tour leg openers? What was that like?
It was, well, to me, that was all great because we only played, 45 minutes, and then I got to watch these great bands. So, it
And
was-
Aerosmith was kind of at a peak right then. They've had like 3 comebacks, and that was during one of them. You know what I mean? I remember because I saw one of those shows. I can't remember if it was Target Center. It might probably Target Center. It's you guys opening for Aerosmith, and I stayed for the whole thing, and they were really great. Really, really great.
well, here I go with the
Names?
lead singer.
Steven Tyler.
Steven Tyler. Yeah, well, this is kind of a funny story because it was our first gig, and we just showed up at the place, and we're in the dressing room, and the conversation got into dirty words, and we were sitting there going, yeah, and I remember I was saying, I just heard this word. I'd never heard it before in my life, and we'd be talking about it. What does that mean? It was filthy. And then Steve Tyler comes running in. He'd heard us talking. He goes, well, there's that. And he started naming off every dirty word there was, and it was weird.
He's like the poet laureate of
Yeah,
dirty
but-
words. Yeah.
Yeah, but he was a nice guy, too. I think those famous guys, like the Stones and all that, I don't think you last that long if you aren't pretty nice to people. That's my guess. They all seem like,
I think my jury is still out on that one.
well,
But again, I'm
I-
Serbian. So.
I didn't talk to the famous ones that much as I usually talked with the bass player.
Yeah, no, those guys.
The other
I mean,
guitar.
obviously, Charlie Watts is the nicest guy in the Stones. You see him interviewed, and he's like, he uses the word lovely a lot. Oh, I love that gig. It was lovely. It was just a
Well,
lovely summer night. It was lovely.
Well, didn't Billy Thomas just do this?
Uh,
Talking?
he's, he's going to do it.
Oh, yeah, well, Charlie Watts came back into our dressing room showing him how he hit the snare drum and how to go at it to where you're not reckon, or you're playing really loud, exactly where to hit it, exactly how to do it.
Showed him that?
Yeah, he was teaching the young
Wow.
kid. And did Billy bring that up when he was there? 'Cause
No, he's not done it yet. He's doing it. Billy's doing that in a few weeks, but I'll ask him about it.
Ask him, because I sat there and, yeah, Charlie Watts was kind of God. And
Well,
he came in just to be real nice and show Billy how to play.
my friend Chris Kimsey, a London producer who produced like 7 Stones albums, he told me a funny story about when he hadn't worked with them for years, and he got together with them in '89 to record the Steel Wheels album, which was a big comeback album for them. And all these technological advances had happened in the meantime. So the guitar players were showing, oh, what do you got? Oh, this is my new toy, and this is my new amp, and my new pedal, and blah, blah, blah. And, the keyboard, Chuck Leavell's like, well, I got a MIDI setup now and all this fancy stuff. And Charlie walks in, and he goes, oh, yeah, I got some new stuff, too. And Chris Kimsey said, oh, what do you have? And he says, I put a new head on my snare drum. And that was it. That was his technological breakthrough, because how do you improve Charlie Watts on that Gretsch kit? I mean, it is what it is. It's perfect already.
Well, when you said you worked with Chuck Leavell, I mean, he's a god, piano god to me.
The Proclaimers record at the old Master Mix at our old campus there, we did a record with the Proclaimers, the Scottish duo. I would walk 500 miles,
Yeah.
those guys. And Chuck Leavell came in and played keyboards, and we got to work with him. It was, and the nicest guy ever, the definition of Southern gentleman. I mean,
When we saw the Rolling Stones, I got to talk to him a little bit, but if you watch a Rolling Stones show, if they let the camera get over there, he's telling people, he's making motions.
oh, he's directing?
He's directing the band.
He's the Doug of that band. So you got a lot of other songwriting opportunities then, because people got to know about your songwriting from getting songs on Johnny's 2 big albums on A&M, which the same thing happened for me. I got a lot of writing opportunities because people liked both of our stuff on those records, even though you seem to always get the big single. But, whatever. Anyway, like Lie to Me, the title track of the first album. I remember when you brought that in to the studio, and it was slower, and I remember you were, I don't know, it sounded more like a Unchain My Heart thing or something like that when you first brought it in. And then David kind of transformed it into what it got to be on the record. Very anthemic and big. And
Well, it was kind of funny because I thought, well, they're not asking me for any songs, and they'd already been recording a bunch. And I was thinking, well, I'd broken up the Hoopsnakes and joined that band, and I was really thinking I'd made a serious error. But then David Z goes, bring in a song. And I just started writing Lie to Me, and so it was kind of I had to do it fast. Write it, get Johnny in Mick Massoff's studio, and then present it the next day. So that's the only time when people go, what did that song mean to you? And it really was, when I call it doing a crossword puzzle, there wasn't that much emotion in it, because I'm sure there's emotional things that come out when you write that you think about later. But
it was about a deadline.
It was
when you
just,
did.
I got to come up with a song fast. And then Johnny came in and sang it, and we did it more like.
Ray Charles.
Yeah, and then he sang it really good, and we came up with a thing, and I brought it in. But there was no, that the way it begins on the clavinet.
Yeah.
That was basically David's egos. We got to have a hook, and I just came up with something fast.
Almost like Stevie Wonder did a little bit, but with a rock
Right.
drummer.
So he goes, yeah, that'll work. He was kind of coming up with how we went at it. So it's basically, it's got a verse, and then the chorus is you just sang Lie to Me a couple times.
But it worked.
And then we did another verse, sang Lie to Me a couple times, solo, and then a little bridge. Then sing a Lie to Me a couple more times and have him play guitar. Right away, David Z said, we recorded a bit of it, and then he went, you got to come up with something more for a chorus. You can't just have that Lie to Me. So I was going, oh, man. And later, he's done that a bunch of times over the years. And later, I go, why don't I naturally do more? But if you listen to Beatles songs, lots of time there wasn't a chorus.
No, it's AABA, right?
Yeah, I think just being a Beatles fan, it came naturally.
Well, it wasn't until the 80s that everyone started getting into verse, chorus, verse, chorus. In the 60s and most of the 70s, tons of songs are verse, verse, bridge, and the chorus is just the title that you stick at the end or the beginning of the verse.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Or like our blues background and blues songs, the last line of every verse is, the blues is my business and business is good. I live the life I love and I love the life I live, whatever.
And Etta James did it. That's one of the coolest things. Yeah.
So let's hear a little Lie to Me.
Well, I was just going to say that after we gave him that song, after the people that were running the money heard it, and they said, we like that just the way it is, then David goes, forget that chorus. Basically, that's how that went. I'll play it quiet because there's no band. Lie to me, tell me everything is all right. Lie to me, tell me that you stay here tonight. Tell me that you'll never leave. I just wanna make believe everything you're telling me is true. Lie to me, go ahead and lie to me. Lie to me, go ahead and lie to me. Lie to me, it doesn't matter anymore. It could never be the way it was before. If I can't hold on to you, leave me something I can hold on to for a little while, to let me dream. Anyone can see that you love him more than me. Right now, let me pretend that our love will never end. Lie to me, go ahead and lie to me. Lie to me, go ahead and lie to me. Well, I hit a couple wrong notes. Whatever.
Don't ever admit it. Oh my God. We all know that. Any questions for this guy? We got a couple more minutes. If you guys want to ask any deep, dark, probing, personal, inappropriate questions. Okay, we'll just make stuff up then. After your songwriting got more acclaim from people hearing them with these Jonny Lang records, because there was 2 double platinums in there, you ended up writing songs for some other people too. What other artists have cut your songs?
I'm kind of bad at remembering all the
Well, there's
names.
some I'm trying to remember too. We're pathetic. There was one really big one that I was jealous of. Some big blues R&B singer or something that cut one of. Well, we both. You said Joe Cocker cut "Lie to Me"
Yeah,
after Johnny did.
yeah, and
That's a nice feather.
He's a great singer. Yeah, it's a great version. One of my favorite things.
He just recorded He just recorded one of my songs a few months ago for a record, and nobody even called me or told me anything. I found out about it because I stumbled on the internet. Someone said on some website, "Oh, Kevin Bowe has written for Joe Cocker," and I was like, "I wish." And then I hit the link, and it was like, "Holy crap!"
Yeah.
And there it was. Unfortunately, that site also said that I wrote for Dean Martin, which is not true.
Dean Martin?
Yeah, this website said Kevin Bowe has worked with Dean Martin, and I was like, and it's funny we should be talking about that because just today, I always thought it was just some random internet foobar thing, and today I figured out why. You know that song of mine? I think you've heard this one, Sault Ste. Marie.
Yeah.
I play it with my band a lot.
Yeah.
Guess who has a song called Sault Ste. Marie? Dean Martin.
Well,
So
maybe that's how they
someone
got
thought it
mixed
was the
up.
same song. Yeah.
I was going to say Phil Phillips on that. I don't watch those shows very much on TV. American Idol.
I don't watch that.
Well, he won it, but he did that one I was doing, Still Raining.
He did Still Raining, really?
Yeah.
On TV?
Yeah, and that he was.
So basically, then for Bruce McCabe, when that happened, you were like, "Yeah, it's still raining, money," which is good.
They paid good, and it was. I shouldn't get into the surgery I had, but I wasn't able to play for a while, and that was to me kind of. He was a very
Tided you over.
Christian guy, I think, and but to have that happen when I couldn't be out playing gigs.
That's nice.
It was very nice of him to do that.
Well, it's nice of you to write the song. I'd say you made it rain.
But that song was so sad, and he sang it so happy. At first I went, wow. But
It's so weird to have somebody else interpret your material.
I got to really like what he does, so that was interesting.
I'll tell one last story that I bet you forgot this happened. But when you and I were working with Shannon Kerfman, she was this young gal from Fargo who was kind of be like Jonny Lang #2, but a young girl instead of a guy, and she played guitar and sang. I don't think she was ever up to Johnny's level, but she was good. And we wrote songs together with her for her first album on Arista. And one day you came over to my house, and me and Shannon were there and struggling with some crappy idea of mine, and we were like, "What do you got?" And you pulled up, and you were driving a van back then. And you said, nothing. I don't have any ideas. I was like, really, nothing? You said, well, I got this one thing. I wrote it down on a napkin on the way over. And we said, oh, let's hear it. And so you sat down at the grand piano in my living room and played True Friends, which apparently you had made up in the car on the way over.
Well,
And that was really when I first started disliking you, actually.
well, it's
Because it turned out to be, of course, the first big single on the record.
I love watching the Tavis Smiley show. He gets a lot of musicians on there talking. Somebody was just on there talking about how song idea would come in his head, and he'd have him falling over his car, right? And that's
I do that.
exactly what I did there. Or
You got to grab them when they come because you won't remember it later. I mean, I never remember ideas later. It's the middle of the night. I have paper and pencil next to my
a lot of times
bed.
I just have an old tape recorder. And what's funny, a lot of times too, is I'll get home and I'll have a few more ideas. And I'll start working on the song, but then I'll play that very first idea that came in that was slightly different and better because it's coming from somewhere else. You know, a lot of writers talk about it. Some of your best songs, it's like you're not writing them. It's coming from somewhere else. You're in a state of mind where you're just writing it down.
The important thing is to be in the frame of mind to receive it. so that you're paying attention when those things come in. Because I think they come into a lot of people, but some people are too busy texting or whatever they're doing, and so they miss this thing that's being given to them. The other thing I think is important is every time I have an idea, I write it down. Every time.
Yeah.
But I also have a paper shredder, a real one in my office, because some of those ideas, when I look at them later, are so embarrassingly stupid that I don't even want my wife to see them.
Now I'm going to give you a lesson. Keep it, and maybe 15, 20 years later, it'll look good to you. You might relate to it more later. So I get bags.
If it has any merit at all, I keep it. But sometimes they're so embarrassing, I have to shred them, because I think if anyone saw them, it would be like, you know.
Well, back when I used to drink and write, some of those I had to throw away for sure.
Yeah, right. You know, that's the difference between us. I don't need to drink to write crappy songs. All right? I can do it sober. All right? I'm strong.
Neither one of us have been able to drink for quite some time.
No, it's been a long time. Well, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming, because I know your public speaking is not your favorite thing, and I just appreciate you taking the time to do this. Thanks for coming, you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bruce McCabe.